so we're going to start thinking about the winter nutrition fairly soon. We're winding down the summer, and the grass is starting to grow back in some areas, and others, of course, it's not. But you have to start thinking about getting your winter supplies in, your hay, what kind of grain you're going to be using, and maybe get your hay bought. It's probably too late to buy it off the field at this point, but the farmers should still maybe have some second cutting, some later cuts available. Hopefully you have hay stored. Remember that hay is the most important nutrition for the horse in the winter. So it's more important to spend your money on good hay than to spend it on grain. The better the hay you buy, the less grain you'll need to feed. And I hope you're all finding hay, and I hope you're finding good hay. It's been a difficult year. Some parts of the country have drought and they don't have much hay, and it can be hard and expensive to find. But here in the Northeast, or the Mid-Atlantic really is where we are, hay's been pretty good. So hopefully the hay shortage won't apply to everybody. And I think the farmers up in Canada have done really well. So hopefully we will have good hay supplies this year. Anyway, send us in your questions. We're happy to answer them. I hope you all are having a good time. As the season winds down, we begin to enter the shows. We have the championships, the Region 1 championships for dressage for next month in October. Dressage at Devon at the end of September. So the shows are starting to their end of season furore. And I hope everybody's been doing well and having a good time, and their horses have been sound and healthy and happy.
Kendall 97 says, I've added flaxseed to my horse's daily feed since learning it would help with their weight gain.
And has it helped with your weight gain, Kendall? We would love to know if it's been effective. How long have you been doing it, and has it shown any effects yet? So let us know. But that's good to hear.
Do all your horses get flaxseed?
Not all of them. Most of them get it. Some of the owners don't want their horses to have flax, and some of the horses are fat anyway, and they don't need any extra calories. And then a couple of horses won't eat it. So, yeah, most of the horses get it. But my show horse gets it. Both of the show horses get it. But, as I said, we have a couple of super fatties, and they don't get anything but hay and a balancer pellet. We don't add any fat into their feed.
Adventures of Nemo and Loki said, I feed graze on grass in place of chaff.
Okay.
Micronized linseed and a light balancer plus supplements.
Cool. It sounds to me like you might not be in the United States. That sounds to me like you're probably in the UK. Is that correct? If so, let us know. I'm interested to know whether the spread of this TikTok video is on a worldwide basis. I know we have some big viewers in Australia and New Zealand, and I'm particularly interested to see if we have any in Europe or England.
She's from Scotland, living in North Yorkshire.
Okay. Good for you. Whereabouts in North Yorkshire? I went to school at Newcastle upon Tyne, Newcastle upon Tyne, up there in Geordieland. So I have some experience of North Yorkshire. So where in North Yorkshire are you?
She's still typing.
Yeah. It'd be pretty late there. They're 5 hours ahead, so they would be what? Midnight. It would be midnight your time, or even 1 a.m.
Just outside Selby.
Selby, Yorkshire. Okay. It's a pretty part of the country. From the Yorkshire moors.
Kendall says about the flaxseed. It's only been a few weeks, but I'm hopeful. Do you have any suggestions for free choice mineral / salt?
I would just buy a mineralized salt from your local ag store, and you can put it into one of those little feeders in the stall, if he's in a stall, and let him help himself. If you're outside, it's a little harder because it gets rained on, but you could put it in one of those rubber tubs, and then they will self-feed it. It's a good idea to have it available. The reason why salt blocks work better is because they're less inclined to get dissolved when in the rain. But you can use the free choice minerals from the ag store. Salt is salt, and all livestock require salt. But if you can get a mineralized salt block and then put it out. And if you put the salt block in a rubber tub, that which dissolves in the rain doesn't get into the ground, it stays in the tub. But that's what I would do. I hope your horse shows a good effect. Let us know whether it does or doesn't. We're always interested to hear feedback from people.
Adventures of Nemo and Loki said, yep, it's after midnight.
Yeah, I'm sure, in the UK. Yeah, a late nighter. But do you have a holiday tomorrow? I think it's only in America that we have a Labor Day. Tomorrow is Labor Day, for those of you who didn't know. And, we're not at work, they told me. So I'm going to have a day off tomorrow. It's going to be cool. I'm going to do more work in my garden, pull more weeds out of my flower bed, which badly needs it.
Sorry, I'm having technical difficulties.
Okay.
2, 5. I have to set a code. 2284. Okay, you're good.
We have these technical things going on here. Dee Dee, who is my technocrat, is trying to do us on. We're going to have 4 devices for one live video. It's amazing. We have 2 a phone, a camera, and a computer so far. And she's threatening to make me use my computer. Well, with my computer skills, that's probably not going to happen. But anyway, we will see. But yeah, all the technology you can handle.
So as horses go into, or as we start going into fall, is there anything that we should watch out for?
As we go into the fall and then obviously following the winter, there are a couple of things to watch out for. There's usually a flush of growth of grass when the fall rains come. Now this depends, of course, on where you are and what climate you have. But be careful of the fall flush of grass. If you have a Cushing's horse or a horse that's sugar sensitive, you may have to restrict their grazing, use a muzzle, whatever your favorite method is. The other thing you need to think about now is that as the days shorten and the nights lengthen, the horses will start to grow a hair coat. The hair coat growth is triggered by light, and the shortening of the day is what triggers a hair coat. So, your Cushing's horses are going to be already too hairy, and you'll find that they'll grow even faster. Then the other thing to look out for are things like after the first frost, you would worm the horses with a boticide that would kill the bots. And then you would be watching them, obviously, as the weather gets colder, for signs of not handling the cold. Maybe you need blanket, maybe you need more forage, maybe they just need a windbreak. A little bit depends on the breed of horse and exactly where you are. If you're south of the Mason-Dixon line, it's probably less of a worry than if you're north of the Mason-Dixon line. We don't get the winters in the south that they have up in the north.
Kendall says, thank you. I've learned so much and feel more confident in my horse's feed since watching your videos.
Well, that's good. I'm glad to hear it, Kendall. Stay in contact. Let us know how it goes. And if you have any other questions, feel free to ask. We're here to answer. I hope all this is useful information for people. And people benefit from it. And then their horses benefit from it, hopefully. We have fewer feeding problems. So yeah, it's a fall, and it's really nice out here right now. It used to be that we were like in the 70s and 80s in the evenings, and now we're down to low 70s, which is very pleasant. We're sitting out here on my porch, my new screened-in porch that we built this summer, and I'm enjoying the cool evening, the breezes. They said it was going to rain today, but it never actually did, so maybe it'll make up for it tonight. Who knows?
No questions yet. It's always at the end of these things when everyone starts asking.
Everyone gets involved towards the end. Oh, well, cheers to everyone.
Or you've given them all the information.
I've answered all the questions. There are no more.
Oh, here we go. Ado Annie asks, when you supplement a black horse with black sunflower seeds, do you feed in the shell?
Ideally, they would have the whole ones, But commercially, the whole ones are usually outrageously expensive and not practical. So then, yes, you would feed in the shell. The problem with the shell is the shell itself prevents proper digestion. So if the shell can be cracked, that would be ideal, so that the digestive enzymes can get access to the content. But black oil sunflower seeds are probably more effective if they're fed whole than if they're fed shelled, but they're very hard to get hold of whole. And if you're going to the feed store, ag store to get them, they're almost guaranteed to be in the shell, because they're being sold for bird food, and birds can open the shell with their beaks. So, ideally whole. Can you see the questions on the computer as well?
I can.
All right. So we need questions, guys, or comments, or observations, or just tell us about your horse. We're interested to know what's out there and what you guys are dealing with, and what's going on, and who's doing what. Fill us in. So
So why did you write the book?
Why did I write the book? Well, I was giving a talk at one of the expos, and somebody from Story came up to me and said, "You should write a book." And I said, "Okay, that sounds like a good idea." So I did. It seemed like a good idea at the time. And part of it is that there weren't most of the tomes available on nutrition were either too basic or too scientific. They were either the university level, highly research-oriented books, or they were pony club level. So my idea was that we would have something in the middle. You would have science, you would have modern-day information, but not presented in quite the format that the research papers are. In other words, readable. So that was the idea behind the book, yes.
Missing Foot asks, how can I transition my horses to free choice alfalfa when they only get it twice a day now?
You just gradually increase more alfalfa in the amount that you give. And you might want to put it in a net or one of those feeders so that they don't waste it. Because the big problem with alfalfa is there's so much leaf drop. It's an enormously wasteful hay. You want to keep it in some kind of container so that it doesn't get spread out. And you just gradually add in more and more until they are eating it, and until they free choice, as much as they want. Free choice means as much as they want. So you're just going to increase the supply until you reach saturation.
Is there anything you shouldn't feed free choice?
Oh, well, the only things you should feed free choice are forages. And it depends on where you are and which forage is available. Free choice alfalfa, it depends on the horse. Now, some horses will get very fat if you feed them free choice alfalfa, because alfalfa is very palatable. Horses like the taste of it. They're going to keep eating it way beyond what they would if it was grass hay. So what you might find your free choice alfalfa is that your horses get a little chunky, in which case you have to cut them back a bit. I mean, it's not a big deal. Just don't feed them as much. Maybe not free choice anymore. They get their more limited amounts. But the only things you should be feeding free choice are forages, grass or preserved grass in the form of hay. You definitely should not be feeding any grain free choice.
So what happens if the horses get too fat because they won't walk away from it free choice?
You reduce how much you have available for them so that they basically eat until they run out, and then they get bored and go off and look for something else to eat elsewhere, and then they move around a little bit, hopefully. The other thing is to put the hay into something that impedes their ready access. So some of those small whole hay nets that you can get, or a feeder that limits how much they can get at once so that they're slowed down in their consumption.
Could you mix it with something else too?
You can mix it with straw, you can mix it with grass hay. Anything that is a little lower in feed value will slow down consumption a little bit. It depends a little bit on the horses.
Matt Campbell 707 asks, is magnesium supplement helpful for spooky horses?
Usually. Now, of course, not always, not 100%, but it's always worth trying. If you have a horse who's hyper-reactive, spooky, try them on a magnesium supplement, see if the behavior gets better. I mean, that's the best way to do it, is to trial and error. The best one to feed, of course, is quiescence. And you can get a free sample by calling Foxden Equine, and then you try it and see if they get better on it. And if they do, you have the answer. And if they don't, you'll go look somewhere else.
Driller's wife asks, do you have any recommendations for a PPID horse age 25 not working?
PPID is the fancy name for Cushing's. Low starch and sugar diet, some of high-quality whey protein in the diet to help the loss of back muscle, zinc and copper and magnesium to help protect them from the laminitis that they're going to be very prone to. But high fiber, low starch and sugar.
Missing Foot asks, could too much alfalfa cause colic?
Not colic usually. Alfalfa is a feed that is very digestible and it's easy to move along the track. It does not usually cause colic. There are many causes of colic, but overeating alfalfa is not usually one of them.
Do any forages cause colic?
Not if they're fed normally. Now, the number one cause of colic is dehydration, insufficient water intake. So if you've got too much forage and not enough water, the not enough water will cause the colic. Make sure they have access to fresh water at all times. The number two cause of colic is intestinal worms, parasites, and those you would deal with you would do a fecal flotation, check the amount of eggs. If you had a high shedder, you would be treating them with a suitable worming drug. Then the number three cause of colic is too much grain. So too much forage is very unlikely to cause colic unless they're not drinking enough water.
Missing Foot says, thank you so much. This helps a lot.
Good. I'm so glad.
Mariah Weddington says, I have 2 Clydesdale fillies. They're on JR Glow feed, quality hay, and ulcer prevention. Am I lacking anything?
Probably not. I mean, Clydesdale draft horses are going to eat a lot of hay. They need to be fed basically forage. You've got a good balance of pellet going in and salt. You should be good. But go by the horses. If they get a harsh coat, if they lose weight, if they don't have good hoof growth, then it's time to take a more detailed look at what they're eating. But the hay and a balance of pellet and salt should be good.
Is ulcer prevention important in young horses?
Depends where they live and under what circumstances they're living. If they're living in a pasture with grazing with other young horses, probably not. Remember the 3 F's of horse happiness: forage, friends, and freedom. So if the horse is out in the pasture with his buddies, he's probably a fairly low-stress life and he's not likely to have ulcers. If they are stressing for any reason, if you've removed a buddy, if they've been weaned from their mama, if they're being shut into a stall, if they're on a work schedule that bothers them, these are the usual causes for ulcers. It's usually as a result of stress or too much grain or some other problem. But young horses grazing in a pasture with their friends, they're very unlikely to have ulcers.
Mark Iverhees says, I have 3 horses, 1 hard keeper, 1 steady keeper, and 1 easy keeper, IR. Mm-hmm. Is there a unicorn forage that would possibly suit all of them? I just took them off grain and have them on a small amount of beet pulp with Timothy and bluegrass hay.
You're doing right. I would say Timothy or orchard grass hay or bluegrass hay, any good grass hay. Some a mineral balance of pellet and beet pulp is good. The thing to watch is the hard keeper. What you probably find is that the medium keeper and the IR horse do just fine. Your hard keeper, you might have to take him away once a day and feed him a little extra something. Or you may have to get some kind of high-fat feed into him and not let the others eat it. So the thing to do is to watch the horses carefully and just kind of go by the horse. And if you have one that's losing weight on the diet, then you'll have to take steps to make sure increase his food intake. But the probability is they'll do fine. As long as they all get equal access to the hay.
Starbuck Acres asks, is a half pound of sweet feed or any grain 1 to 2 times a day daily used as a treat, can it cause any harm?
Probably not. I mean, half a pound that's 8 ounces. That is not that much in a life of a horse. I would say if you want, one of the useful things about giving a horse something like sweet feed or grain is that they like it, they come for it, they expect it, so it makes them much easier to catch when you want to do things with them. And if they come to you twice a day on a regular basis, so they get used to the routine, that makes management much easier. And that's actually one of the reasons why we feed grain. It's not so much the nutritional value, but it's the management value in that it makes the horses come up to you so that you don't have to traipse across the pasture to find them. But it shouldn't do any harm unless you have a very, very sensitive horse.
Starbucks says, thank you. I have a large herd and I need them to come in from a large pasture for well checks.
That would be one good reason to do it. If they see the food truck, they come running. That's what we do with ours. We have a herd where they really don't need grain, but we give them a little bit of grain every day so that they come up and then we see them and check them over while they're milling around, arguing over their handful of grain.
What do you feed your horses?
What do I feed my horses? I use a generic pellet. Happens to use one used by Blue Seal. It's called Trotter. They get about a half a pound a day. And then I will add, according to the workload, age, circumstance of the horse. So we have a very mixed bunch. We have retirees who live in the pasture who get their half a pound. We have young growing stock who get a good bit more than that. Then they get a mineral balancer pellet, and they often get some Limpro that we make. We have horses in hard work that are competing. They, of course, will come into a stall and get fed considerably more food. And then the pregnant mares will be fed more. So, we start out with the half a pound of the basic pellet. We add a mineral balancer pellet, and then we add extra according to the needs of the horse.
Bama British says, you remind me so much of my mother. She was born in Ipswich, loved horses, and was brilliant.
There we go. I like the last bit. I wasn't born in Ipswich, but I like the last bit.
Equievolution says, I have a senior with no back teeth, so access to traditional forage doesn't work for him, but I don't want to have to take him away from his buddies.
So what you might have to do with him is feed him in a limited, you could fence off a corner of the paddock and you put him in there to eat his special feed, and then when he's eaten you let him back out. It's kind of a pain because you have to stand there and wait for him to finish chewing, such chewing as he'll do. And he's going to eat things like soaked alfalfa, beet pulp, what have you, that doesn't need as much chewing. But yes, you'll have to separate him just at the feed time so that he can eat his feed without being chased off of it by the fatties, and then put him back out with his buddies when he's done. We have a couple of old ones that we do that with as well. And that works pretty good once they get used to the system.
Driller's wife asks, do you have any supplement recommendations for allergies? Runny nose, itchy eyes are the only symptoms.
There's not much you can do nutritionally for allergies. Make sure that they have, clean feed, that it's not dusty, so there's no dust flying up to irritate the eyes and the nose. Maybe wet the feed. It's not nutritional, but it's more a management issue. If they're outside in the pasture and they're itchy, this is pollen. This is not something you could control. You could use antihistamines, but, limit on those, particularly if you're showing. If it's a question of being in the stall, minimize dust. Wet the hay, wet the feed, keep the dust down as much as possible.
Equievolution with the older teeth, or the older horse without the back teeth, we do exactly that, but during the day, everyone else has hay. He tries to eat the hay that's out, but quids it all and just makes a mess. Is this okay?
Yeah, he's not getting nutrition out of it. because he's just chomping on it and then spitting it out. But as long as he's maintaining his body weight on what you're giving him, it doesn't matter that he stands there and chomps on the hay and then spits it out. I've had some older ones who do that as well. It's a mess. You just pick it up. It's like manure. It has to go on the muck heap. But that keeps him happy. He thinks he's chewing. You know, and then his nutrition is what you put in his feed tub.
Thanks. I'm just not sure if it's a choke issue.
No, it shouldn't be. They don't usually try to swallow it. They usually just spit it out. That's why clumps of chomped hay lying everywhere. Yeah, we've had some 30-year-olds that were doing that kind of thing. They didn't colic or choke, but they used to quid all the time.
What is quid?
Quid is where they chew the hay and then spit it out, as opposed to chewing the hay and swallowing it.
She says, thumbs up.
Thumbs up. All right. Cool. All right.
It's quiet tonight.
Quiet tonight, yeah. You're all busy doing other stuff. We seem to be getting a lot of people from the UK. They must be bored out of their gourd if they're up this late.
Tracy Marie asks, any advice on working a horse that I believe has arthritis and is somewhat lame but willing to work?
Hyaluronic acid. Try a liquid hyaluronic acid product. HA is wonderful stuff. It's the best treatment for arthritis out there. It's the gold standard, and that's what I would use. And I would use a liquid preparation if possible because it's much more absorbable and much more efficient than giving the solid powder.
What supplements do you use for your horses?
Limpro, quiescence, track guard, muscle mix. All the ones I make.
They all get everything? All the things?
No. There's some. They all get Limpro, track guard, and quiescence. And then some get muscle mix, some get Soluflex, some get other things, depending on what the issue is with that particular horse.
When do you start feeding HA?
Well, usually when they come into serious work. So somewhere around 7, 8, 9 years old, when the work starts to become reasonably hard. 3, 4, and 5-year-olds, hopefully we're not working them that hard. They shouldn't need HA, but yeah, as soon as they start competing.
She says she is on it, the liquid version, and she has been for a few months.
Right, keep going and maybe increase the dosage. HA is very dose dependent, so maybe give them more.
Marie Ellen Cleven asks, do you have any opinion on camelina oil?
It's an oil. It's a useful oil. It's unsaturated. And like the flax oil, it's going to be beneficial. Fats are very beneficial to horses. Good hair coat, help with hoof growth, that kind of thing. But it be the same as the flax. Camelina is just a fancy version. It's marketed, well marketed.
Is it more expensive?
Yeah. Anything sold to horses is more expensive. You know that.
Yeah, always.
Yeah.
And how do you feed your flaxseed oil?
I don't feed oil. I feed flax seeds. I feed whole seeds. We add it to the grain, and then we wet the feed at feeding time. So it's fed wetted, but pretty quickly after it's wetted. It's not sitting around soaking. We just toss it in the bucket, and then at feed time the bucket's mixed with water and then fed to the horse. So I like my oil in the flaxseed.
And you don't soak it overnight?
No, just feed it, wet it at feed time.
So, some people boil it, I've heard.
Yeah, boiling is one way. That was the old traditional way of treating it. It's not necessary.
Tracy, the one with the older horse that has some lameness, she's at a good weight. She was really heavy, working her a little bit at a time. She is 20 and has neck. Well, I hope she has a neck.
Right. She may have a cresty neck.
Yeah, it's
what Tracy means. You could try her on some magnesium supplement, Tracy, and see whether that reduces her cresty neck. Sometimes magnesium does. Not always, but sometimes extra magnesium will reduce the crest on the neck. And sometimes that's why they're lame, is because the cresty neck is often a horse with a mild case of laminitis. So if her laminae are inflamed and sore, that would be one of the reasons why she might be sore in front. Again, magnesium will help.
5 Pony and Pups says, after stressful/new event is over, but there's nothing, I didn't see another comment, so I'm not sure if it just didn't come through, but can you ask her?
5 Ponies and Pup, we only got part of your question. You said after the stressful event is over. I assume you're referring to the ulcer question. One of the things you can do is, while the stressful event is going on, is feed extra calcium in the feed so that you offset the excessive stomach acidity, which then would maybe prevent the ulcer forming. It's hit and miss. There's no guarantee that's going to work. But that's one of the strategies we sometimes use. If the horses are going on a trailer ride and we know that's going to stress them, we will give them some extra magnesium or calcium to try and offset acidity in the stomach.
It looks like she might have gotten disconnected because she just rejoined.
Oh, rejoined.
So
okay.
we can give her a second.
Give her a second, yes.
Tracy says, oh, sorry. Yes, crusty neck. I have your quiescence, and she was also on remission.
Okay, well, that's good. Yes, that would help.
Mariah Weddington said, farrier trimmed my poor Clyde and took way too much hoof off. Do you have any supplements to encourage good hoof growth?
Good hoof growth is based on 4 main nutrients. You want to make sure there's a good quality protein. You want to make sure there's fatty acids, that there's biotin, and there's zinc. One good quality supplement, the one we make, Limpro, provides all of those. But if you're in any doubt, those are the 4 you need to look for. High quality protein, that can be whey protein. Biotin, which can be bought as biotin or in a B vitamin complex. Fatty acids, you can do that, and with your oils, they can be useful for that. And then zinc, you look for a supplement that contains zinc.
Board.
Okay, we have to record, yes. We're recording this, because apparently we're going to go on YouTube. So you can come and listen to it all over again at some other future time. Yes, you lucky people.
It's riveting stuff.
Riveting stuff.
Tracy says, thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and I hope it all helps.
Lycia Leash says, a horse I take care of has a really bad top line. He's fat, but his back needs help. Exercise doesn't seem to help.
So there's a couple of things. First of all, it would depend a little bit on his age and also on the kind of work he's doing. He needs to work those muscles to build those up. So he needs to be doing the correct kind of exercises. And then you find yourself a book on dressage training or flat work and look at the muscles, the exercises that work the back muscles. You could try a little whey protein in his diet. That will help the muscles build if you're doing the work. If he's of a certain age, if he's cushingoid or PPID, then the chances are you won't get a whole lot of muscle building up because the PPID tends to destroy back muscles. Again, some whey protein might help with that.
16 and all of the other horses are perfect. So it must just be him.
All right.
Tracy says, one more question. Haha. What do you suggest for weight gain? She isn't on grain, just beet pulp and some alfalfa.
I would add in some flax, whole flaxseed, or maybe some rice bran. High-fat feed will help them gain weight, and it'll do it safely. They won't be starch and sugar only if they're in hard work. So I would go with rice bran or flax. Or if you can't use those two, you could resort to corn oil. But flax or rice bran would be better.
And this is for another horse, not the crusty neck horse.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious for the lady with the all the other horses have nice top line, but that one doesn't. Should she get the horse checked out by a vet for Cushing's?
Might be an idea to take a check. Yeah, have an ACTH drawn, see whether he's got Cushing's. 16 is a little young, but some horses get it at 16, so yeah, I would have him checked. The question would be, does he keep his hair coat a little bit too long? If he does, then that's another symptom of Cushing's.
Mariah says, thank you so much. I'm a first-time Clydesdale owner, so I want to make sure I'm doing it right. Appreciate you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Draft horses are a little different from other horses. They're bigger, but they're pretty efficient. So, they don't really need as much more food as everyone thinks they do, just because they're so huge, because they're more efficient in digestion.
Saddlebred Amy says, I have been told to top dress grain with an oil to help add weight. If so, which oil and how much?
The cheapest that you can get in the supermarket would be the best that I would go with. But better than oil would be rice bran. Rice bran is more palatable than oil and less of a problem to handle and deal with. I prefer flax to either that or oil. Flaxseed up to 4 ounces a day will help them gain weight, and it's very beneficial. But if you're going to pick an oil, it really does not matter which oil. Corn oil or canola oil, either one. Olive oil would be too expensive, and I wouldn't go with it. Canola or corn, whichever's available in the supermarket at the right price.
And how much?
How much? It depends how much the horse will eat. I would start with 1 or 2 ounces, fluid ounces a day per meal, and then gradually work up. If he will consume 4 fluid ounces, that would be ideal. But not many horses won't eat that much fat. So start small, build up. That's where rice bran or flax are an advantage, because they're more palatable, so you can add a whole lot more to the feed before the horse says, I'm not eating this.
5 Pony and Pups. She's trying again. Is there anything to help situational nervous diarrhea? She was the one that said when his buddy leaves or whatever.
Okay, when the buddy leaves. One thing, if it's occasional, if it's kind of happening intermittently, one thing you could do is get kaopectate from the ag store. Kaopectate is sold for calves with diarrhea, and it's a pink liquid. And you pull it up in a syringe and you syringe them, and that just stops the diarrhea for a little while. And this is why it's not something you would keep the horse on. You would just use it occasionally as you needed it. If they got anxiety diarrhea once in a while, and if you knew the situation was coming, you could preempt it with some kaopectate. That would be the way I would handle that. Otherwise, maybe a wheat bran in the diet would just settles the GI tract down a bit. But kaopectate is the most effective anti-diarrheal. But you don't keep the horse on it. It's not something you would feed every day. You're just going to use it occasionally when the horse needs it.
Are there any forages that can help?
Not particularly. Diarrhea is more in the first part of the gut, and forages are just going to pass through and go into the hindgut anyway. But a horse with a good forage intake is less likely to have diarrhea problems than a horse with a poor forage intake. So adequate forage will help with the situation. So if they're anxiety and they're whipping around the stall and they're all worked up, they're probably not eating the hay anyway.
Would you give magnesium to a horse like that, potentially?
I might, yeah. I probably would give him some magnesium. Magnesium or calcium, both would help with settling the GI tract. And magnesium would help with anxiety. So you maybe try them on a magnesium supplement and see whether that settles them down. I mean, you'll have to try. Horses vary. Some horses it'll work on, some horses it won't. So, questions, people? We are looking for, and tell us about your horses. We're interested to hear some feedback from our adoring public.
Last time we did one of these lives, we had so many questions, I think we had to cut the questions off.
Right.
It's probably because you haven't done one of these in a while.
Exactly. It's been a while.
TikTok's punishing you.
Apparently. My adoring public is off somewhere doing something else.
Of course, you're also not begging for likes, either.
Right. Oh, I'm not begging for likes. Apparently you have to like me. They tell me I need to have likes. So please, everybody, hit like. Even if you don't, just hit like.
They can just tap the screen and it sends a like. And
you just tap the screen.
What it does when you get a lot of likes is it'll show up to your other followers. Okay. So that helps them know that you're live.
So tap the screen or hit like so that everybody else knows we're on.
There you go. Mariah Weddington said, everyone is at their Labor Day stuff and half in the bag already.
Yep, probably right.
Probably true, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm sure they are. Well, the last one we did was July the 4th, and I was amazed at how many people were watching live TikToks on July the 4th. I thought they'd be all out blowing up fireworks and eating hot dogs and marshmallows, but apparently they weren't. But anyway, Labor Day, I guess they're not out cooking hot dogs again.
Corn Dog says, is there any allergy testing for heaves?
Heaves is in itself an allergy test. I mean, you can have the normal panel done, but if the horse is showing signs of heaves, he's showing you a fairly clear indication that he's allergic to the mold in the hay. And the answer for that is to steam the hay or soak it, one or the other. Steaming is more effective but way more expensive because you have to buy the steamer. Soaking is not as effective and can waste a lot of hay, but it's much cheaper to set up. But you've got to reduce the mold that he's breathing in. It's not the mold he's eating, it's the mold he's breathing in as he eats the hay that's causing the heaves. It's the same as someone with asthma. Now you can give prednisone, you can give steroids, but they have their own side effects, and they have a price, not just in cost of the drug, but in what they do to the body. So it is better to use steaming or soaking to prevent the heaves than it is to use steroids.
Now, soaking versus steaming, we were reading an article some time back that soaking gets rid of the nutrients in the hay.
Soaking is much less effective than steaming because you do actually get rid of a lot of the nutrients in the hay. Plus, the hay becomes very unpleasant. When the hay has been soaked, it starts a fermentation, and after a few hours, it smells very bad, and the horses don't like to eat it, and you have to throw it out. Whereas steaming just kills the bugs, and then the hay still smells good, and the horses usually eat steamed hay very well. So, if you can afford a steamer, it is a far better way to handle heaves than if you have to soak. But, steamers are not cheap, so sometimes people go with soaking because it's less expensive.
Jay Bratt says, I'm a huge fan of whole flaxseed, but I had my mare off it due to it more than doubling in price.
True, but then all grains are going to get expensive. I mean, I'm sorry, but you're going to have to get used to that. It's it's pricey. It's doubled in price, but so is everything else.
Invertebrates for Fun asks, how do you feel about feeding oats to quarter horses that are not in work?
Oats are a good feed. If the horse needs the calories, oats are a good way to supply them. If the horse is fat and chunky, I maybe wouldn't be feeding him much of any grain at all, but if the horse is needing the calories because he's not maintaining his body weight or because he's getting skinny, oats are a good way to supply them. They're certainly better than some of the other methods.
Jay Bratt says, I just put my mare back on the flax a month ago, and what a pleasure to ride since she has been on it.
Good.
Flax really helps her attitude.
Yeah, flax is good stuff. And I know it's expensive, it goes up in price, but everything's going up in price. You should see hay prices at the moment. And hay is by far and away the most important nutrient in horses. More important nutrition for horses. They must eat their forages.
Ludacris asks, what's your opinion on a balancer versus a more complete feed? My horse used to be on poulin grains.
Mm-hmm. A balancer pellet is usually fed in smaller quantities than a complete feed. The idea of a complete feed is that you have everything, including all the fiber. So you would be feeding much larger quantities of it. A balancer pellet does not pretend to supply any fiber. It's just the vitamins and minerals and maybe a couple of other nutrients, and you would feed it in very small amounts. So it depends on the circumstances and the management of the horse. If they're getting adequate forage and they can eat hay, they've got good teeth, they're not allergic to it, then I would use a balance of pellet and hay. That is a better method to feed them. If they cannot eat hay for whatever reason, then a complete feed might be the way you have to go in order to get enough calories in the horse when it can't eat hay. But remember, with a complete feed, you're going to be feeding a whole lot more of it than you will with a balance of pellet.
I missed the second comment, sorry. Ludacris said, my horse used to be on Poulin Grains Balancer, but now he's on Purina Strategy Healthy Edge.
Okay, that's good. As long as he's doing well on it, that's all that really matters.
Now, are Balancer pellets cheaper than complete feeds when you consider it by the pound fed?
Depends. I mean, that's impossible to answer because it really depends on which make, where you are, how much you're paying, how much you're having to feed. In general, I would say very generalized, a balance of pellet and hay should be less expensive than a complete feed. But, not necessarily. If you're paying $25 a bale for hay, then maybe not. But, it depends where you are in the country and what you're having to pay for your hay.
Tiscare Nordic is stud asks, is there any good feed to help an older mare's fertility?
Mare fertility is not necessarily controlled by nutrition. One of the things I would look into was an adequate mineral source, high quality protein, and lots of unsaturated fatty acids. So flaxseed, whey protein, and a good mineral balance of pellet. You just want to make sure she has optimal nutrition for handling whatever's going on. But fertility in horses, it's not nutritionally controlled.
Invertebrates for fun. Can you please compare chia seeds to flax seeds? And will soaked chia seeds still need to be ground?
If you soak them, you don't need to grind them, that's for sure. Chia and flax are very, very similar, except in price. So there's really not, nutritionally, there's not much difference between the two. And in both cases, if you soak them, there's no need to grind them. So I would pick the one that you can get most readily, consistently, at a price you can afford.
Can you switch back and forth between them? Like, say, 1 year, okay, like 1 week they have flax and...
You can do them one and then the other. They're so similar nutritionally, it really doesn't make any difference.
But chia is usually quite a bit more expensive, right?
Usually much more expensive, yes. Unless you're lucky and luck into a good supply at a lower price, and then the flax has gone up.
Dominique Lavers asks, what are your thoughts on feeding blue-green algae for metabolic syndrome?
There are better ways to deal with it. Blue-green algae is touted as, I don't know that there's no data. There's lots of anecdote, but there's no data on feeding blue-green algae. No one's ever done any investigations on it. The best thing for metabolic syndrome is to exercise the horse, make sure the minerals are sufficient, copper and zinc and magnesium are the most important, some high-quality protein, and not too much sugar and starch. And blue-green algae doesn't even come into it, to be truthful. I mean, I've read all that stuff about blue-green algae. None of that has any scientific basis. No one has researched it. So we really don't know. But it's hard to imagine how blue-green algae is going to make any difference. Unless they're growing it in a zinc and copper enriched environment, in which case it might be supplying the zinc and copper. Mm-hmm. Sometimes they'll do that with algae. They'll grow algae in an enriched environment and it can supply more of a certain nutrient. Chromium in yeast is one of those examples. Yeast that's grown in a chromium enriched environment supplies more chromium. You can also grow yeast in other mineral enriched environments and it can be a source of minerals for the animal.
Is there anything that blue-green algae could help with horses?
If you read the literature, it cures everything. I don't know. As I say, blue-green algae has never really been investigated. So nobody really knows what it can do or not do, as the case might be. It's it's one of those things. It was a solution in search of a problem. Someone wanted to market it. One of the things with blue-green algae is you have to be careful with it. You can overdo it, and you can have toxic growths. So be careful on your supply of blue-green algae.
Why is that?
Because if you have a toxic growth, it'll hurt the animal.
I mean, why does it have toxic?
Because environmental issues, you get a flood of something into the lake, or if it's grown in vats, they can control what goes in. But if it's harvested out of a lake, then you don't know what's flowing into that lake.
Here's a good one. Jay Bratt asks, "What's your opinion on the new, at least to me, practice of feeding fresh sprouts?"
Fresh sprouts, as in sprouted grains. I think it's fine. I think it's probably unnecessary, but I'm sure it has some benefits. Sprouting changes the nutrient balance of the grain, uses up some of the starch and sugar, so maybe it's a little lower in starch and sugar. It'll be higher in protein, and maybe higher in some vitamins. In judicious amounts, it certainly won't hurt, and it might possibly even help. Again, no research. We don't really know. So it needs to be looked at by somebody to really get some hard data before we can say.
Are those the same as microgreens?
No, microgreens are freshly grown. They're things like cress and alfalfa and what have you. So yeah, I guess they're a sprout because they're a sprouted grass. But what they'll do is they'll sprout barley, or they'll sprout quinoa, or they'll sprout, hopefully not wheat, oats, and then you'll feed it right then and there. They're a little bit tricky in as much as you have to be careful how they handle. They can go bad very quickly.
Mariah Weddington says, "One more question."
No problem. As many as you want, Mariah.
My Clyde had canker last year. Besides avoiding sugars, is there anything to avoid to prevent it? Again, I'm not sure if it's a nutrition thing, but want to make sure that I do everything I can to avoid that mess.
Yeah, canker is a problem with draft horses. One of the things with canker is you don't want to overfeed protein because there's no hard data, but there's some indication that maybe excessive protein in the diet can exacerbate the tendency to produce cankers. Draft horses need to be fed hay and straw and grass and really very, very little grain. Almost all grains are not good for draft horses. So they are evolved, developed, designed, whatever you want to call it, to live on forage. Feed them forage and a balance of pellet. And that would be my best advice on feeding those, to keep them. Enough B vitamins, but not too many. You don't want to be feeding brewer's yeast or any of those. And you certainly want to stay minimal grain on those horses. All right. How are we doing?
Well, you answered everyone's questions. I don't know if there's any more.
All right. So we're coming to an end, folks. Time to send us the last questions in, or we're going to be off fairly soon. We've got 3 minutes, according to my phone, anyway. So it was good to have fun. I hope you all enjoyed your Labor Day weekend. I hope you all had a good time. Those of you who were horse showing, I hope you did well. And we look forward to seeing you next time.
And of course, now we have a ton coming in. Okay.
All right.
Ludicrous. Do you suggest feeding a joint supplement before you notice any joint problems? I have a healthy 15-year-old.
Yes, I would. On a 15-year-old, I would be feeding HA before. It's a good idea to preempt it. Particularly if you're working it hard and if it's a competition horse, it's much harder to fix it once it's started. So prevent it. Feed them soluble HA or HA solution now before it goes lame.
Corn Dog asks, what are your thoughts on haylage? Not planning to feed it, just curious.
Haylage is a form of ensiled grass. It's some halfway between hay and silage. Silage being grass straight off the meadow. Hay is grass that's dried. Haylage is semi-dried and then ensiled. It was a very good feed. It's very useful for horses that are allergic to hay. It has a high protein content. It's a good feed as long as it's well made. It is trickier to make than hay, and about as tricky as silage, and it can have problems associated with bad bacterial growth if oxygen has gotten into it. So, yeah, haylage is fine. It's a good feed. Just be careful where you get it from because it needs to be well made.
Dominique says, thank you from Canada. And Mariah says, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Enjoy.
All right.
All right.
We'll wrap it up with that. I think we're finished.
Wrap it up. You all have a good weekend, and I look forward to seeing you next time. I hope you all have a good time.